If Texas A&M is going to take a step forward defensively in 2025, it is going to start with the secondary. And I know that's a group that caught a lot of heat last season, rightfully so. They struggled down the stretch. The Auburn game, the Southern Cal game, both those games were defined by secondary blunders. But you have to remember, this was a unit that was built together through the portal, players rising up through the younger ranks within the team, players changing positions like a Tyreek Chappelle and a Bryce Anderson. And in those consequential games, you were down Will Lee and Tyreek Chappelle, probably your two best DBs on the team. But you get everything back this year. You have no reason not to improve as a unit. So to break it all down, I brought back Matthew Dawson. You've seen him on the Redshirt Sophomore podcast. You've seen him on TexAgs. And we did not hold back. We went deep on this video. It's going to be a longer video, but if you're like me, you're going to learn something from Matthew because this man is very familiar with the team. He's close with these players. He sees everything firsthand. And he gave us some really, really good insight on what to expect and the development of some of these players on the team that are just looking to take that next step. So you want the full picture of where things are heading this fall camp, this is it. And if you're enjoying this content, guys, before we jump into it, make sure you like and sub. It helps me greatly. Quick shout out to RHOBACK for supporting the show. They just launched their new A&M collection. Polos, hoodies, quarter zips, all built to actually wear, be extremely comfortable, and look good. Use code Drewtamu for 20% off your first order. The link is in the description. The stuff looks really nice. I'm wearing the hoodie now. You're going to see one of the polos in the show, but let's get right into this thing. All right, guys, let's talk the defensive back group. Here he is, Matthew Dawson. He's back. We had this conversation last year. For those that don't know you, tell everyone who you are, what you do, and where they can find you.
Well, Matthew Dawson, I'm over there at the redshirt sophomore with my brother. Been going through, new stages of our life, so we haven't been able to upload a whole lot recently. We got stuff in the chamber, just gotta fire them off. But yeah, CD, that's my brother. He does it with me. Ball knower of ball knowers. He's in grad school right now, so he's grinding it out, moving jobs right now. Just moved into a new place, so yeah, it's been busy for me. But you can check us out at the Redshirt Sophomore. We love collabing with Drewtamu. This guy, love what he does for the A&M community. So obviously you're watching this because you guys like Drewtamu, but just keep it going. This
They're
guy,
watching it because they love Matthew Dawson. The Dawson brothers are certified ball knowers. So, guys, make sure you check them out because you want a scouting report on an opponent, you go to the redshirt sophomore. That's what I did last year. But anyways, we're talking DBs at A&M. It's a very important position group, maybe the most pivotal position group on the team if you're looking at it. Did this video last year, and the conversation contrasts quite sharply with what we had last year because we're talking about what they built in 2024. It was a totally rebuilt secondary through the portal, new faces stepping up, a couple of major position changes like a Bryce Anderson back to safety, Chappelle to nickel. And obviously the pass defense was a major weakness at A&M in 2024. Bottom 4 in passing yards allowed in the SEC last year, dead last in yards per completion. So Matthew, take me through last year. What went wrong in this A&M secondary? And is it something that can be fixed from one year to the next when you run back the exact same group for the most part?
yeah, because it wasn't down to down consistency, just getting absolutely torched, on there were big third downs that they needed to get off the field, sure, but and Mike Elko said this how many times? It was explosive plays are what just killed this secondary. Killed. And it wasn't like explosive plays like, oh, some here, some there. Like they were happening pretty consistently in pretty big moments in games that we lost, right? 20 plus yard completions given up. They gave up 41. That was 13th in the SEC. You know who was dead last in the SEC in completions given up over 30 yards? That would be Texas A&M. They gave up 24 of those.
I'm getting flashbacks to Auburn right now, man.
Yeah, and you know what? Here's the thing. You had people playing new positions. You had injuries in the secondary. You had new faces. If you think about it, every single player in that secondary to start week 1 was either playing a new position or they were basically a new face there. So there was a lot for sure to learn from this group. And I think they learned it the hard way, which is pretty unfortunate. But things we got right last year. We said that BJ Mays is SEC ready based on what we saw against Georgia in 2023. I thought he came to the table great late in the season. I thought he was really nice. Marcus Ratcliffe, we said that he could be a contributor early, but maybe his best years are ahead of him, which we'll talk about him, man. I still love Marcus Ratcliffe. I still think he's fantastic.
He's an
And
offseason darling, according to Elko and the guys. First week of pressers, he got some high praise.
sure, man. And last year too, Chappelle going down. All right. I mean, that is a guy that just started as a true freshman in Mike Elko's system. As a 3-star, we'll call him undersized for like an outside corner because what is he, like 5'11,
Yeah,
6 foot, and he was fantastic that freshman year. Now he was playing with really good defensive line, a great unit in the secondary behind them. I mean, he was playing with a lot of great talent around him, but I think the move to nickel was going to benefit him because his freshman year he got a lot more involved in the run game. Like he's a pretty good tackler, man. He's a
yeah.
good tackler. He's good in space. I think losing him that early in the season was big. I mean, we saw Jaden Hill maybe was not playing at the level that Texas A&M needed him to play in that nickel spot in some big moments, and I'm sure a lot of A&M fans watching this remember a large number of those moments. And then ultimately, BJ Mays ended up coming in, later in the season. He did really nice, but Jaden Hill was also banged up too. Marcus Ratcliffe was banged up late in the season. I mean, injuries, and we talked about depth in that secondary potentially being a strength, although there were a lot of new faces, and you saw some of that depth, step up in moments, but like Des Ricks, down the stretch, but he too also gave up a lot of big plays, and they bring in a cornerback, to compete with him for that cornerback 2 spot. It's interesting because that was the only transfer. Well, besides Jordan Shaw, like they didn't invest heavily into the secondary in the transfer portal. In fact, they didn't invest defensively in the transfer portal very much at all. And as someone like Mike Elko, who's going to be taking more hands-on approach with the defense, that should be very telling. Like what he really values this defense at, and like the talent that he has. He thinks that, yeah, this is all there, man. Like he has the talent. This isn't necessarily year 4 Mike Elko, Texas A&M talent, but he believes that he can win with the talent that's here in this secondary.
Yeah, you look at the group. I don't think there were any spring portal, additions across the team at all. I think the team was happy with what they had from spring going forward. And yeah, you talked about the injuries last year, and you think about some of the worst secondary games. Auburn comes to mind, and obviously no Chappelle in that one. And I think Will Lee went down like the first or second possession of that game, and that's a ripple effect. You're talking about BJ Mays plugging and playing really well at the nickel position. BJ Mays was a natural corner. He played nickel, I think, for the first time in his college career at A&M, and he played really well. And, Chappelle doesn't go down. Maybe BJ Mays can go fill in at corner instead of, going deeper down the depth chart. Maybe BJ Mays can take some of the load off of Des Rick's shoulders that season if Chappelle's still in. So, yeah. And then the bowl game, obviously, you're still down Chappelle. You're down Will Lee from the start in that one.
You're
And you
starting
saw that.
walk-ons, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who played great, by the
Right.
way, played great, but you're starting walk-ons, right?
Right.
So
And you feel that so much. You feel that.
yeah,
It's just a different level. It's, freaking Lincoln Riley offense, and he's going to make you pay. He's going to find your weak spots there. But anyway, getting into the individuals in this defense, in this secondary, obviously a lot of the same faces as we're talking about, as you all know. Let's start with the safeties. So this is a group that, in my opinion, surprisingly struggled in a couple of facets. First of all, tackling was a surprise given just the nature of this safety group that you look at as we were talking off camera about this being a very kind of strong safety oriented group, a lot of bigger guys, a lot of stronger guys. You would think guys like Bryce Anderson, who used to play close to the line of scrimmage at nickel, and you thought that would be good. But there was also coverage bust down the stretch. And like you said, it wasn't every play. It was the big one that broke your back. But as it stands right now, sitting maybe not even quite a week into fall camp, just in your opinion, what do you think the safeties rotation looks like in game 1, and where do they need to clean things up?
that it's a tough question to say like who's going to start because, like you said, it'll probably be a rotation. We saw that late last year,
Mm-hmm.
right? If I mean, I'll take a fly. I think Marcus Ratcliffe is going to be awesome this year, right? I think he will be playing at least maybe down the stretch of the season. I think he will be playing a large sum of snaps.
We're getting those rumblings early in camp. Obviously, one of the big off-season, gainers on the team. Looks fantastic in just, the videos and the images we get of him right now. People that are at practice, you see it. It sounded real confident in that presser. But yeah, man, I'm with you there.
So the obvious three are Bryce Anderson, Dalton Brooks, and Marcus Ratcliffe.
Mhm.
How they're going to use them, I don't know. I kind of got wrong. I thought that they might use Bryce Anderson more in the box, last year, but they didn't do that a ton. But honestly, it's really just like any safety that plays in a Mike Elko defense like can do everything.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say like how they're going to absolutely use these guys, throughout the course of the season. But you got to believe that those three guys are for sure playing a lot of snaps, sharing, special packages with each other. That'll be a healthy rotation, so guys will be pretty fresh. It's that fourth spot. It's like there will still be snaps to be had, albeit maybe a couple a game. Okay, where you're going to have big spots where you're going to need a safety to come in certain packages, and that fourth guy will be Miles Davis. He's just a true sophomore, but he is big. He is fast. He is physical, a thumper. This guy's not afraid, all right, to play football. This guy is here to play, and when he gets on the field, he'll be flying around. He'll play a lot of special teams. You know, would I be surprised if Miles Davis, actually engulfed a larger sum of snaps this year, relative to like what a lot of people believe that is going to be for him this season? I would not be surprised at all. I think Miles Davis is a stud. You just watch him standing next to these guys. Like he looks like he's just ready to go. Like he
Yeah.
looks like he is a college football player ready to play right now in the SEC at a high level. We didn't see enough of like not that he should have been playing as much as he did or more than he did last year, but he's a guy that looks the part for sure.
Yeah.
Will
I
he be
mean,
that part in that fourth? I don't know what that's going to look like. You also got Tom Tom Johnson coming in. I don't necessarily see him playing a large role here on this defense, if at all. For sure, will be a special teams guy. I know the staff is pretty high on him, but uh, this is probably going to be that four man rotation. And I know that Ratcliffe, if you saw like his media availability the other day, he kind of alluded to like he's expecting this like kind of four-man rotation and mentioned Miles Davis being a part of it. So it's going to be those four guys. How it's going to shape out, throughout the season. And one thing that we talked about last year was like with the secondary. All right, you were going to see a way different lineup week 1 than you were going to see week 14. And that ended up being true. Unfortunately, some of that had to do with injuries, but it's really hard to say what that's going to look like. I think snap one, maybe you see Brooks and Ratcliffe out there. I don't know. Bryce Anderson, like he's leading the charge in a lot of these DB drills, and he like practices with a lot of intensity. I could see him out there, snap one. It's not really going to matter. I don't think like who starts,
right.
that week 1. It's going to be about, who's stepping up and making plays, particularly in the run game, because that was such a struggle for this secondary last year. Super high missed tackle rates from, not only Bryce Anderson, but Dalton Brooks, Ratcliffe as well, who's a guy like very sure tackler in the Mountain West. A little bit different bodies in the SEC. But now Ratcliffe has an SEC body if you
Oh
have
yeah.
seen him recently. And hearing him talk, like he's like, oh yeah, like tackling feels so much easier now, like just because I have so much more leg strength, and Tommy Moffitt's just doing a fantastic job with these guys. So I'm excited about that group. That was a group that Mike Elko was extremely confident in last year because he knew of this versatility that he had and he knew of the depth that he had. The issue is like when it just doesn't come together like it did and you're giving up explosive plays. It's also a pretty complicated system. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the first time, except Tyree Chappelle was the only one that had played, in that system before, if I can recall, or Bryce Anderson maybe his freshman year, but um, it's a lot, for those new guys like Ratcliffe and Brooks seeing that for the first time. But I'm excited for that group for sure. But gotta tackle better. Have to. There's no
Yeah.
excuses now. There's
Some
no
of the
excuses.
some of the run fit stuff, they were just out of position at times. I think that South Carolina game, guys just running free because you have safeties just running to the wrong spot. I mean, that's stuff that you can reasonably believe will get improved in a year or two, though. That stuff where you're supposed to be on a defense. I mean, you can talk about the zone defenses where, maybe the single high safety just didn't center enough on a play and the post gets there. I mean, stuff like that would happen all the time with this group. And that's stuff that you can see, fixed in a year or two. Just, the Bryce thing was just surprising to me. I mean, we all look at him as a leader. It seemed like it was a culmination of a couple of years of really solid play as an underclassman to come in his junior year. But I don't know, was it as simple as just moving to safety and then having all new terminology for him? I mean, that seems like something that can bring you down a notch. It was surprising to me. I guess I won't ask you any more about that, but that's what I'm really looking for. I expect a bounce back from Bryce Anderson because of what we've seen from him before. I know he wants to be a leader for this team based on what you're saying, based on him leading the charge in some of these drills. I really hope we see it. And then Dalton, he's just been a guy that, he has all the NFL tools. He has everything you want from the safety position. He's a prototype Elko guy, but just mistakes, and tackling. So we'll be looking just, same group guys, same group pretty much. Just let me throw in a Miles Davis. Obviously, Trey Jones rounded out that rotation last year with a few snaps, but Miles Davis, I think a guy that could rise, maybe not right away, but over the course of the year. I totally agree with you there. But moving along, cornerback position. So you move to the corners and you're looking at a position that has a little bit of a dichotomy when you're looking at one side of the field compared to the other. On one side, you have like one of the more rock solid returning players on this entire team. And on the other, a little bit of uncertainty. Maybe many would assume is a real fall camp battle between a couple of guys. But let's start with that side where we know who will be out there in snap one of the year, Will Lee, a guy that graded out as A&M's second best coverage player last year per PFF, a guy whose absence was felt in those couple of games that we mentioned, a guy that seems to be making a very intentional effort to become more of a leader on this team. He did great at media days. I thought it was a really, really great interview at media days. And, I think that's part of the growth. But what's the outlook for Lee in 2025? And do you think A&M has that true lockdown corner that they had in years past under Elko?
Will Lee was so good last year. Like, he was so good. Like, we're talking about, like, all SEC defensive back, second team all SEC. People are like, okay, well, what does that matter? Okay, like, first team all SEC this year was Trey Amos, high second or late second round pick. Nicky Manwari, early second round pick. Malachi Moore, fourth round pick. I mean, been a stud for Alabama that was his fifth year being a stud for Alabama. Jahdae Barron, who was a first round pick as well. And then the second team, all SEC, Will Smith is right there in competition with Malachi Starks, who was a first round pick, Jermon McCoy, who's going to be a projected first round pick this year, and Isaac Smith, who was Mississippi State's, I'll say, best defensive player last year, in my opinion, unless I'm forgetting someone. He played at an elite level last year, and he played against some dang good receivers. I mean, just go back and think about some of those teams that he played against where he just blanketed that one side of the field. He was so good hip to hip. And we talked about last year, we both expected Will Lee to be the starter at cornerback. But we were like, okay, let's tamper expectations a little bit because Kansas State, before he got here, that was his first year playing Division I FBS college football.
Yeah.
Before that, he was playing junior college, albeit dominating JUCO. And then, all Big 12 honorable mention, playing partial snaps at Kansas State, who had a pretty good secondary of their own that year, comes to A&M, and we're like, okay, he's long, he's tall, right? He's pretty darn fast. He's physical. We got this guy. What is he going to do here? And he was fantastic. All right. I expect him to keep that level, right? You're in the same system. He's same physical build. I anticipate him only getting better. You're already looking at him like, hey, where's he going to be drafted in the NFL? When you're already talking about that, from a cornerback, which, by the way, a position that, when was the last time A&M had a cornerback drafted to the NFL? How many elite corners, have you seen from Texas A&M? You haven't seen a ton of them in recent years. This guy is really good, and you have something really special that Aggie fans have not seen, for a number of years. He's going to shut down, all right, that side of the field. I have no doubts about that. The other side of the field, you have Des Ricks, super athlete, right? Brother of Eli Ricks, was a highly rated recruit, played at IMG, went to Bama, a little bit buried on the depth chart, comes to A&M, super athlete, not a lot of experience, ended up having to play late in the year. He wasn't fantastic by any means, but you can see the talent and the athleticism there, right? We've seen cornerbacks develop, at a high level. Cornerback is your outcomes, right, are either, giving up a giant play, or forcing an incomplete pass.
Yeah, I felt like Ricks would have been absolutely serviceable if you had a guy like Julio Humphrey last year, and Ricks is just part of your rotation, he's not just on an island every play. He led the team in coverage snaps last year, and that's a super young guy. I mean, we just asked a ton out of a really, really young player against some tough opposition, and that culminated in that USC game against, Lincoln Riley offense.
Yeah, against some dang good receivers. By the way, like guys are going to get every receiver that was playing in that game probably is going to go to the NFL if I'm, you know, thinking about all his names correctly. And then Javon Thomas, didn't necessarily perform the way that you thought he would, at the cornerback spot last year. And the big question mark, it's like, what you have in those guys, and you're like, okay, can they get better? You bring in Julio Humphrey, right? Or Julian Humphrey goes by Julio from
Yeah.
Georgia. And you go back and you're like, holy cow, this guy started like 10 or 11 games for Georgia. Okay. And then you kind of see that, okay, well, where did that snap count go, right? He ultimately, got beat out by, Daniel Harris of Georgia, who's a really dang good cornerback and he's young himself. And I think a change of scenery can be really good for Julio. Like, you have to understand, like, who's in that secondary. Like, when we're talking about Georgia, we're talking about a team that has had 8 DBs drafted to the NFL in the last 4 years. I don't know, like, what that number means to everyone, but that is insane. That is nuts. All right, we're talking about just elite talent across the board. He's competing with these guys, starting, like finding spots and playing time on that team. So coming here in a new scene where you need a second cornerback to step up and play big time. This was a hot name, right? This was a hot name in the transfer portal. A&M, we believe, was pretty dang lucky to have him. Can he put it together completely for a full season? That's a question you got to have. You're going to have a superior athlete, right? He is a very good athlete. He's going to be physical. He's going to be, in your face. He's going to play with some fire. I think I like what we see from him, and I think the players do too. You hear like these wide receivers and these other DBs talk about him, and these players are speaking glowingly about him, and they're singling him out. Right, this is a guy that's been a teammate of these guys for not that long right now, and they are speaking very highly of him. So I got to believe. If you were to ask me right now, okay, who's that starting cornerback in that second spot? I would guess Julio. It may not be, right? It could be Des Ricks. We got a lot of fall camp here to go. Javon Thomas, of course, is in the mix. Don't see any of those like true freshmen. I mean, you got a bunch of true freshman corners,
Mm-hmm.
coming in. I don't see any of those guys necessarily like playing in a big role, but you could be surprised, right? Mike Elko's not shy about playing true freshmen if they are going to be impact players, day one. But I would be very surprised if that happened. I think it's, those 3 guys that you are potentially looking at for that cornerback 2 spot. And in that first game, it might be a couple drives of Julio, it might be a couple drives of Des Ricks. Then maybe you see 1 drive of Javon Thomas. I don't know what it's going to look like. Also, Will Lee is not Iron Man, like he played a significant number of snaps last year. Is he going to be able to play 80 snaps like he did against Mississippi State, like every game? I don't know. I hope so because I think he's really good. But I think that's what we're looking at in that cornerback room. A lot of more uncertainty. That's where, that in the nickel spot or where a lot of explosive plays came from. It actually wasn't isolated to any singular position. It
Right.
happened. These breakdowns happened all over.
Yeah.
But having a solid cornerback too would be really nice to compliment.
Yeah, it's nice to have a competition. It's nice to have 3 guys that are going to fight for it because obviously Will Lee's rock solid. Let me ask you this before we move to nickel. Was Will Lee a draft pick last year?
I think so, probably.
Yeah.
And Mike Elko's talked about this too, like with multiple other positions. Like, what do you need to win football at the highest level? You need to have NFL draft
Yeah.
picks. I think the last, you know, what is it? Probably since Alabama won the national championship in COVID. No, probably since LSU in 2019. Every single year since then, 2019, LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, all those teams. Every team that won the national championship had the most NFL players drafted that season. And part of that's because they won the national championship. Right? A lot of scouts are going to have those eyes on them in that game. But part of it's like, yeah, you need NFL talent to win football games in college, and Mike Elko talking about like, yeah, we retained a lot of
Mhm.
NFL, like guys that probably could have gone, but maybe wouldn't have been drafted as highly as, uh, they thought,
You
or
think of Armage, he could have gone for sure, I think,
absolutely
and
could have
gotten drafted
gone.
late. Scooby was borderline. I mean, who knows? Probably not, but he could have maybe found his way somewhere
Yeah.
after
Mike
the
Elko's
draft.
talked about Cassius Howell potentially, being on NFL draft boards. I,
Yeah,
I don't know. He would know better than me.
yeah.
Um, Will Lee, another one of those guys. So, and with the kind of having to rehaul your defensive line, having NFL talent at other positions is wildly important. In fact, I did place a national championship ticket for a team that I think will have the most NFL draft picks. Unfortunately, it's not Texas A&M this year, but I think it's so important. So when you're asking like, okay, like will he would he have been drafted last year? I say yes. Will he be drafted even higher next year? I also think yes. Retaining talent like that, majorly important for the success of any program.
Yeah, it's huge, and you get that in Will Lee. And we'll see what happens at the other corner spot, but I think we're going to be a lot more steady in that nickel position from week one, as long as the guy stays healthy. Because as we were talking about, that was a pretty consequential position group throughout the year last year. Obviously, as we talked about, Chappelle goes down. You have a bit of a lull there at that position, not what you wanted. In the LSU game, obviously, BJ Mays was the hero, and he really helped that thing out. But he's gone. Chappelle's back, and in these glimpses we're getting of practice, he seems like one of the guys that was injured last year that's ready to go. I mean, from what we see, it seems like he's close to 100%. Talk to me about why he thrived moving to nickel. Was that the first time he moved to nickel, or did he start at nickel with Elko? I can't remember. Maybe you can tell me that. And what does getting him back there mean for this team?
Man, number 7 out there, Tyree Chappelle playing nickel. He started outside corner. And I remember like watching him that what was it, that 2021 season?
Arkansas, Burke. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, I remember watching him and they did this thing like they would play pretty tight, like on the line 5-7 yards a lot of times, and like I'm like, oh boy, like when's he gonna get beat here? Like he's just gonna get like out muscled, whatever, And at the time, like I think Mike Elko has this stigma of like playing really long, lanky cornerbacks, and I don't think that's true necessarily. I think he plays guys that are willing to tackle. I think he plays guys that are and guys that are willing to tackle and guys that are good in coverage. And I think Chappelle is just that. And playing him closer, to the ball and more up on the line of scrimmage at nickel, dude, I think that could be huge. Like we didn't like hear about Chappelle. I think we recorded actually last year, like right before like that news of Chappelle practicing at nickel kind of
Yep.
came out. And I was anticipating him playing that cornerback, spot outside of Will Lee on the other side. But having moved to nickel, I heard that I'm like, that is a really good idea. That is a really good idea because I think you got a guy with super experience who's a great tackler, and guys that are experienced and are great tacklers. You don't need to be mega fast in Mike Elko's nickel spot. You just need to be by the ball. You need to have instincts. You need to fight off blocks, and you need to just make tackles. And I think Tyree Chappelle can do that at a pretty high level. Now, have we seen him play significant snaps in nickel? No, no. So it is somewhat projection. And if you're worried about like his injury, I don't know that it's like I think he'll be fine. Right. Like I think we're gonna assume that he's going to be fine. He's back. He's excited to play. He loves football. He loves Texas A&M. He is going to, I think, make this defense significantly better because boy, Drew, the first half of the season, the nickel position was a hot topic because it was not
Yeah.
being played well enough. And you do have some guys behind him, though, that like if something were to happen or his injury was lingering, which it's not, but don't even want to speculate anything like that. But I think you got guys behind him that are pretty good. I think Jordan Shaw, what he showed at Indiana and Washington, I thought like he was physical, and I thought like he made some nice plays in the run game. I didn't think he was particularly bad in coverage. I thought like he played at a pretty high level against some pretty high competition in the Big Ten for 2 years. And he's still a little bit younger. He's a little bit smaller, but I like him too. I think he's going to be pretty decent. In fact, I'm a little more confident in him than I was even Jaden Hill coming in last year. And Jaden Hill, you were getting a veteran player who wasn't amazing at Florida, but a veteran, knew Bateman very well and played a lot of nickel there in the SEC. So I even feel better about Jordan Shaw coming in than I did about necessarily Jaden Hill. And then Brevion Rogers, you hear people talking about him like he looks a lot bigger, like he's here another year in the system, a guy that's slowly working behind the scenes, guy you don't hear talked about a lot. I think Brevion Rogers, you'll see him on special teams, be an absolute animal, flying around. Him and Miles Davis, special teams guys that you're going to see flying to the football. I hope Brevion Rogers gets snaps this year. I'll say it. I really hope so. I think that he's a darn good football player. He's more built than he has been in years past, and I'm excited for him. So the nickel group, you got this super veteran that hasn't played necessarily a lot of nickel, but knows the Mike Elko system well. You got this guy that comes from Washington who's pretty solid, significant experience, but still like only like a true junior or whatever. And then Brevian Rogers, who doesn't have a lot of experience either. But the common denominator with all of them is I think that they're all pretty physical, and I think that they're all pretty decent tacklers. Jordan Shaw's fine. He's decent. He's good in space. So I'd have confidence in him going in if something were to happen to Chappelle. I know some people are projecting Jordan Shaw to start over Chappelle, like from a national perspective. Obviously, in the A&M circles, feels pretty solid that Chappelle is probably going to be the guy, but you never know. I mean, we're wrong about stuff every year. But that's a position that I don't feel too terrible about at all. And that is a wildly important position in Mike Elko's defense. I don't think people understand that enough. Like, it is so important that you play great nickel in this defense.
Yep. Yeah, man. I'm excited to see it. I can't wait to watch Chappelle for a long stretch of games because I think when you're looking at fall camp reports last year, and you always take that with a grain of salt. But when you're looking at the guys that know, Chappelle's at the top of that list every report. It sounds like he was one of the guys that was really, really finding his stride early in fall camp last year. Can't wait to watch him. I was going to ask you about the depth pieces, but it really seems pretty cut and dry. You know who your guys are. I think it sounds like we have a relatively strong understanding of what this rotation is going to look like. 4 guys at safety we talked about, 4 guys at corner we talked about, 3 guys at nickel. It sounds pretty secure. So I guess we'll just skip to just this overall outlook this year. And you talked about some of the tests that Will Lee passed last year and, what led us to see that he's a really great corner. Think about the tests coming this year. I mean, you're going to have Lenore Sellers. You're going to have, whatever Nick Harbor becomes. You're going to have DJ Lagway and those receivers. You're going to have Arch Manning, Wingo Moore. You're going to have Nuss and, that whole receiver room going on. It's to be a really good test for these corners this year. And a guy like Will Lee coming back really with a chance to elevate that draft stock in a big, big way. It seems like he's a guy that made a great decision because what's in front of him is major opportunity. So having said that, knowing the opposition this year, what do you think of this room? I mean, how much we know it's going to improve, like it's going to get better, but to what end? And is it going to be able to take A&M where they know this defense can go?
I mean, every year under Mike Elko, A&M's defense got better, right? Particularly if you look at the secondary, it was very apparent. I think, what was it at 2022's or was it 2021 season maybe? Man, I'm mixing up my years, but you had, one of the top projected secondaries, coming into college football. You thought, okay, A&M might be a top 5 defense. And then you had real struggles in the run game once McKinley
that was
Jackson,
21 to 22. Yeah.
21 to 22. You had severe struggles in the run game because
McKinley was down early that year. You had a young D-line, and there was secondary. I don't know what the word is. They took a step back because that was Antonio Johnson. That was Jalen Jones. That was Damani Richardson. And they just didn't play as well.
Yeah, and when Mike Elko left, you saw an immediate decline in the defense from year one, and it's going to happen, a lot of times when you're changing systems. But those guys, in those DB rooms that were so good for Mike Elko, just homegrown guys, guys he cherry picked himself, and he said, "These are my guys that I want. These are really good athletes. These are guys that are great tacklers." And I think you have a lot of that this year. I think it's very telling. I think that he likes what he has here, which gives me a lot of confidence. You're going to be playing, like you said, some really good receiving rooms. You mentioned Florida. That's one. Auburn, obviously, is like kind of circled on there too. It's nice that you get him at home. But boy, that receiver room is very good. If Jackson Arnold figures things out over there, like you're going to need. And people are also projecting. You also got to look at like what kind of offensive lines are you going to be playing this year. Like when I look at this schedule, like I see like 5 like very good top 10, top 15 offensive lines on this schedule.
You might be playing the best offensive line in the country in week 3.
Yep.
Auburn's going to have an improved offensive line.
People are saying top
Texas should
10.
be
Do we
fine.
think it's
I
top
don't know.
10?
It's going to be better for sure than what
It'll
they've
be
had.
better.
It'll be better. I mean, Arkansas
Yeah.
might finally have a good O-line, decent O-line under Sam Pittman this year. That's possible.
Yeah,
I
I think
mean,
so too. And they're so revamped on the offensive line. It's insane. So you're
yeah.
going to have a good secondary. And that's like, oh, but Arkansas's receivers are all transfers or whatever. If you can't get to the quarterback, all right.
Mhm.
South Carolina's leading receiver last year was a tight end. All right?
Yeah.
So clearly it does not matter. All right. If you're not getting to the quarterback, all right, you're going to have to, be able to stay dialed in there in the secondary against games like. Now, I do think that A&M's defensive line should cause Arkansas's offensive line problems, but that doesn't mean they're not improved. Florida's offensive line will be one of the better ones in the country. LSU, obvious decline on the offensive line, but it'll still be fine. I mean, what's his name? Josh Thompson is that his name from Northwestern? Stud.
Yeah. Mhm.
Braylon Moore from Virginia Tech is experienced at center. You can finally kick what's his face, who was terrible
DJ
at
Chester,
center.
yeah, he needs
He's
to play
terrible
guard.
at center,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
kick him to guard, and like you'll be fine. South Carolina, another year. I mean, a lot
Yeah.
of guys there that have been there for a couple years. You're projecting them to get maybe a little bit better, but who knows with them? And then Texas should have another really good offensive line. So like, yeah, you're playing a lot of really good offensive lines
You're
on
going to
this
have to help the
schedule.
D-line out. You're going to have to help that pass rush out. We talked about it before the show. Last year, one of the problems was a lot of the quarterbacks that A&M faced had season lows or close to season lows time to pass. They were getting balls out. And I don't know, man. We this could be scheme playing around, Scorton and Stewart, but it could be DBs as well. It could be part of it. So, you're breaking in new defensive ends. We're not talking about that group today, but they look like they're going to be a pretty good pass rush group. I mean, on paper, that's the kind of bodies you brought in. That's the skill set you brought in at large in this defensive portal hall. That's what you focused on this defense. And these DBs have to help them out with these challenging offensive looks. A lot of good passing attacks, you would think. And a team like LSU and Texas, well, I wish we would have gotten them earlier in the year because maybe they're breaking them in. But by the time we play them, those guys are, half-season veterans at worst. So, man, there's a lot riding on this secondary group. I think maybe the most of any position on this team. And we'll see how it goes, man. But I know it's going to be improved. It's going to be better than
Has to
last
be.
year. I
Has to
mean,
be.
and more so than just saying it can't be worse. I know it's easy to say, and that is true. It's funny to say, but it makes sense getting into year 2 because in year 1, you are thinking a lot more. You're a lot more focused on your assignment, a lot more aware of your body, aware of where you are and what you're doing. Hopefully a lot more flow, a lot more rhythm, a lot more comfort in a year 2. But all right, Matt, that concludes our conversation on the DB room in 2025. We'll be following along all year, and they'll be following you too, Matt. Tell them one more time where they can find you.
Find us on Richard Sophomore on YouTube and Spotify, I guess. But I think YouTube's where you're watching this, so we'll stick with
Check
YouTube.
them out, guys. Seriously, it's really good stuff. But all right, we're going to actually bring them on in the offensive line preview because really excited to look at that one. It'll contrast quite a bit with this group in some ways. You're bringing players back, but had a pretty good 2024. So we will see you then. Until then, gig 'em.